From one user winning back-to-back parlays for hundreds of thousands of dollars, to another user changing his life with just $100, we're gonna go over the craziest sports bets posted to Reddit, part 2. RyG is a user who turned $150 into enough for a down payment on a house. The NHL playoffs started back in the middle of April, and RyG was itching to throw some money on it. Except he wasn't going to be completely reckless with it. He gave himself a budget of $150 and said, hey, if it goes to zero, so be it. That's where he would stop. RyG bet the whole account that the Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Florida Panthers would all advance to the conference finals. With plus 375 odds, the bet would pay out $715 if it was a winner. Starting with the Oilers, they were down 0-2 in the first round of the playoffs, so things were definitely looking rough. But then, they miraculously went on a 4-game winning streak against the Kings, which sent them to the second round of the playoffs. And luckily for RyG, the Oilers really stepped it up a notch and won the second round 4-1 against the Golden Knights. This is great and all, but this was only one leg of his 3-leg parlay. The Stars' journey was definitely a bit more iffy. It was the first round of the playoffs, and both teams were tied 3-3. If the Stars didn't win the next game, RyG would be bankrupt. But the Stars knew it was time to stop cranking the hog and locked in the win 4-2. And second round of the playoffs, they beat the Jets, no sweat. Finally, it all came down to the Florida Panthers. They rocked the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round, but things were off to a rocky start in the second round. They lost the first 2 games against Toronto, and it was starting to look like RyG wouldn't be able to cash out that $700 bet. But then, by the graces of God, the Panthers won the next 3 games in a row, 1 game away from winning it all. But holy moly, they did not lock in the win the next game. The series was now tied 3-3, and it all came down to the next game. RyG watched the game shaking in his boots. Just kidding actually, because the Panthers were off a bean that game. RyG now had $715 in his Bet365 account, but that was still quite a bit away from the $50K he wanted. Right away, he threw everything back into another parlay. This time, he bet the Oilers and Panthers would both advance to the Stanley Cup final. This was another very unlikely bet, so if both legs hit, he'd be paid out just under $2,000 on his $615 bet. He still had an additional $100 in his account, so he threw it on a parlay that wasn't so lucky. The Panthers nearly swept the Carolina Hurricanes and ended the series 4-1. And somehow, the Oilers ended the series the same exact way. So far, RyG took $150 to $2K. He wanted to place another bet, this time on the first game of the finals, except he only bet $20 on it. The Oilers won and the bet did hit, but you might be thinking, damn, RyG is a total softie. A $20 bet? What's wrong with him? But don't worry, he made sure to fix this by betting every last dollar, 2,020 of them in fact, on a 7-leg parlay for the second game of the series. Alright, people on this subreddit are definitely ridiculous, but I think we can all agree that this is next level. There was a more than 96% chance that this bet would not hit and he'd have to kiss his $2,000 goodbye. But if it did, he'd have $52.5K in his account. Let's go one by one on his bet slip. Sam Bennett got his goal, over 6 goals were scored, Sergei Bobrovsky had over 25.5 saves, Brad Marchand had at least 2 shots, Evan Bouchard had at least 3 shots, Leon Draisaitl had at least 1 goal, and oh shoot, Corey Perry did not have a goal. And worst of all, it was the last period of the game with only 20 seconds left. Just like that, RyG's money vanished. It's what I would have said if the man himself, Corey Perry, didn't hit the most clutch shot ever to tie the game. I can't even explain how crazy of a coincidence it is that the man he needed to score for his parlay was the one who did it, but it sure did happen. $2,020 turned into $52,500. Some users commented on his post letting him know that this would never ever happen again, while others said, caution smoshin', keep on ballin' out. RyG was done though and never followed up with a post, so it seems like he cashed out his gains and ran with them. The next story is actually not someone from Reddit, but instead a random 42-year-old man from Pompano Beach, Florida. On April 12th, He took his $200 and wanted to throw it on the parlay of a lifetime. He bet that the Bulls would beat the Raptors, the Rays would beat the Red Sox, and the Yankees would beat the Guardians. There's more though. These were just the moneyline bets. Even though they were the underdogs, he also needed the Thunder to beat the Pelicans, and finally the Mets to beat the Padres by at least 2. If everything fell in line that night, he would be paid out nearly $19,000 on his $200 wager. First game of the night, and things were honestly not off to a great start. By halftime, the Bulls were down 11 points. The third quarter went okay, but definitely not good, since they were still down by 9 points. But something in the universe shifted at the start of the fourth quarter because the Bulls started playing like the 2016 Warriors. They scored 37 points that quarter and took the win that night by 4 points. The next game was the Rays versus the Red Sox, and he honestly didn't even have to worry about that one because the Rays were up the whole game. Next, he needed the Yankees to beat the Guardians, but this game wasn't as smooth as the last. The Guardians scored 2 runs in the first inning, while the Yankees got none. The Guardians got another in the third inning, and by the end of the fourth, the score was 3-0. It was looking like this was going to be the end of the parlay, but luckily, the Yankees got 2 runs in the 5th inning and made it a 1-run game. They scored another in the 7th inning and tied it up. And guess what? They scored another in the 9th inning, and the Guardians were defeated. They made it out the 3-run gutter, and this left only 2 more legs on the parlay. The Thunder needed to beat the Pelicans, but it was a spread, which gave the Thunder a 5.5 point cushion, meaning they could technically lose, just not by more than 5 points. Even though the Thunder were predicted to lose, things started off pretty good for them, with a 3-point lead at the end of the first quarter. But things quickly fell apart in the second quarter, and they were now losing by 6. They knew they had to show out in the third quarter, and that's exactly what they did. Dropping 39 points, they were once again in the lead by 9 points. The Thunder did get outscored in the fourth quarter, but not by enough to make them lose, with the final score being 123-118. Finally, it was the last game of the night, and he needed the Mets to beat the Padres by at least 2 runs. The first inning was not a good one. The Mets were not winning by 2, they were in fact losing by 2. They were basically in debt 4 runs to the parlay. But luckily, the Mets scored 1 in the 2nd inning, the 3rd inning, the 5th inning, the 6th inning, and the 7th inning, all while the Padres stayed at 2 runs. And somehow, the Padres didn't score a single run for the rest of the game, which meant that our boy's parlay hit and paid out almost $19,000. He made this parlay on BetUS, which is actually the sponsor of today's video. BetUS is a sportsbook that is available in a lot of states where sportsbooks like FanDuel and DraftKings aren't. On top of this, they're also currently offering some pretty crazy sign-up bonuses for those of you that watch my channel. On your first 3 deposits, they will give you a 125% bonus on what you deposit in cash, or you can move that all the way up to 200% if you make your first deposit with crypto. A lot of people in my videos are betting in a very risky and honestly unreasonable way, but with these deposit bonuses, you have a pretty big safety cushion starting out. If you deposit just $100, that means they'll give you $300 total to bet with, and once rolled over, that can of course be paid out with cash or crypto. They'll give you a bonus all the way up to $2,000, which is insane, but of course, you probably don't want to bet that much. BetUS offers a huge variety on their site with over 40 sports, plus casino games, and live bets. The support team is live 24/7 and honestly pretty helpful and responsive. Once again, if you're looking to bet on sports and want someone who's going to give you a solid sign-up bonus, BetUS is the place to go. If you're interested in either of these bonuses, just click the link down below in the description and deposit as little as $50, or just use code YUMMERS125 for the cash bonus and YUMMERS200 for the crypto bonus. Even if you don't want to bet long term, which is of course a losing game for most people, you can instead just sign up and see what you do with your bonus. A. Williams 338 probably had one of the craziest betting streaks of all time. I don't want to spoil much, but this deep parlay demon dedicated himself to taking $25 and rolling it to more and more with every bet, and the amount he made may or may not have been enough to buy a used McLaren. A. Williams' journey starts back on March 1st. He decided to start off with a risky one. Maryland was playing and losing against Penn State. A. Williams wagered $26 on a live bet that Maryland would get to 46 points before Penn State, once again even though they were losing. At halftime, Penn State was in the lead 36-30, so things weren't looking that great. But 5 minutes into the second half, the score was 44-44. Maryland needed to get the next shot or else his bet would not hit. Luckily, Maryland was inbounding the ball. Derek Queen hit a crazy spin move in the paint and sealed the deal. With plus 290 odds, his $26 wager paid out more than $100. But as I said, A. Williams was just getting started. Later that day, he placed a similar bet on Texas Tech. He wagered $25 that they'd get to 21 points before the Kansas Jayhawks. And it seems like it was the bet so nice he did it twice. With $50 on the line and plus 390 odds, he'd be paid out $250 if things went his way. Kansas had a slight lead early on. 4 minutes into the game, they were up 11-5. But jumping forward a few minutes, the tables turned and Texas was up instead. If someone popped the three, that $250 would be all his. Christian Anderson sent it flying and had the reporters in awe.
Oh my goodness. Christian Anderson from way out there.
A. Williams just made another $200 that day and actually kept on betting. His next two bets were pretty minor. A $70 live bet loss on the same game and a $26 profit on another. But this is where things start to get crazy. During the Auburn and Kentucky game, he bet that the next shot would go in. This bet would play out really quickly considering all it took was either team to shoot the ball, so hopefully the next shot would be a nice, easy breezy layup. Kobe Brea hit a crazy pump fake on Zahad Pettiford and had him flying into the stands. A. Williams' $100 bet paid out $205 and he was ready for the next one. The Seton Hall Pirates were playing the St. John's Red Storms, and like a few other of his live bets, he wagered $45 on the Pirates getting to 28 points before the Red Storms. This one had plus 575 odds, so if it did hit, he'd cash out just over $300. With 4 minutes left in the first half, the Pirates were losing 21-26. So it was looking like A. Williams would have to kiss that money goodbye. There was no way they'd go on a 7-point streak without the Red Storms getting a single shot in. The Pirates did get their 2 points, but the next possession was a dangerous one. Davon Smith on the Red Storms was up at the free throw line, and his bet would of course not hit if Smith went 2 for 2. The first one went in and it was looking like it was wraps. Smith took his next shot and, well, A. Williams' bet was actually still possible. The Pirates got the ball back and Dylan Adewusu splashed a marvelous 3. It was now game point for this bet, but of course the Red Storms had the ball now, so A. Williams just hoped that they wouldn't score. The ball got picked and the Pirates ran back with a fast break opportunity. Isaiah Coleman ran it down and A. Williams' $45 bet paid out just over $300. He was already like 10 bets deep that day, but he decided to keep going to see how lucky he could get. He placed another quick live bet during the Auburn and Kentucky game. He placed the same bet as before and on the same game as well, which is kinda crazy to think about. Most of these bets have been placed over the time span of one single game. This time, he wagered $208 that the next shot would go in. Unfortunately, the game went off the air on ESPN for like a solid half an hour for some reason, so the clip has been lost. But according to Bet365, it did indeed go in. $208 to $455 and still no sign of slowing down. His next bet was a little too crazy for its own good though, with plus 4,200 odds and lost him $25. No worries though, cause he was up a total of $800 for the day, which is even crazier when you consider the fact that these bets have all been placed over the past few hours and he only started with $25. Only an hour after his last bet, he started watching the Furman Paladins versus Wofford Terriers game. Even though the Paladins were the underdog, he still decided to bet $250 on them winning the game at plus 260 odds. The Paladins started off very strong, up 11 points at the end of the first half. But towards the end of the game, their lead got cut down to only a couple points. As long as they locked down the Terriers, things would be a-okay. And luckily, this was somehow yet another win for A. Williams. His $250 wager paid out $900, bringing his total profit over the last few hours to $1,450. Right after placing that bet, he placed another live bet on the Mississippi versus LSU game. Like usual, he bet that the next shot would go in, wagering $150. But for whatever reason, he got cold feet and cashed out for a $25 loss. He took a few-hour break, but later that night, he placed his biggest bet yet. The Philadelphia 76ers were playing the Golden State Warriors, And you know A. Williams by now. He's a sucker for fast-paying bets. He's not the type of guy to sit around waiting for the game to play out. That being said, he wagered $500 that the 76ers would be the team to score the next shot. And
The floor, tough shot, and he hits the...
just like that, A. Williams profited another $1,200. So far, he's had an insane journey, but from this point on, he made sure that he wagered thousands of dollars on every bet. He took a 3-day break, but got back to it on March 4th. He created the most perfect 5-leg parlay he could think of. And like I said, this is where things really skyrocketed. Because if he won this bet, he would walk away with a $26,000 payout. But he couldn't get too excited just yet, because he needed Tyrese Halliburton to score over 18.5 points, RJ Barrett to also score over 18.5 points, Draymond Green to get over 6.5 rebounds, Dyson Daniels to score over 14.5 points, and finally, good old Max Strus needed to get over 9.5 points as well. This parlay had plus 2,500 odds, and of course was very unlikely to hit, but for some reason, A. Williams was confident enough in his bet to wager $1,000. This was his riskiest play yet, but he was ready for it. The Pacers game started, and Tyrese was off to a decent start. He had 7 points by the end of the first quarter, which was good, but he needed to keep it up to cash the over. He turned it up even more in the second quarter and made his way up to 16 points. At this point, Tyrese pretty much had it in the bag because he only needed to score 3 more points, and of course he got it done. The Toronto Raptors game was starting, and RJ Barrett was off to a solid start as well, with 5 points by the end of the first quarter. Barrett had a crazy second quarter and made his way up to 15 points for the game. Barrett slowed down over the remainder of the game, but still ended up getting the over with 21 points for the night. The Warriors game started, and, well, you already know Draymond's a dog and got that over. By only 1 rebound actually, but, you know, he still did it. A. Williams was 3 for 3 so far. If Dyson Daniels and Max Strus both pulled through, he would profit $25,000 for the night. The Atlanta Hawks game was going on, and unfortunately, it was looking like Dyson Daniels was gonna ruin the whole parlay. There was only 5 minutes left in the game, and he only had 12 points. He needed to hit 2 more shots for the over, or, of course, a juicy 3. And actually, Daniels pretty quickly hit a floater, bringing his total to 14. Unfortunately, time was winding down and there was only 1 minute left in the game. A. Williams opened FanDuel and felt like Daniels completely gypped him, until he swooped in and got another floater in. A. Williams was 4 for 4 now, and it all came down to Max Strus getting that over. He averaged just over 9 points throughout the season, and he needed to get at least 10 that night, or else the parlay would not hit. Strus played decently throughout the game, but it was looking like he might not be able to get the over. There were only 2 minutes left in the game, and Strus was sitting at 8 points. All he needed was a layup, and A. Williams would walk away with $26,000. But Strus kept on passing the ball. He must not have wanted the parlay to hit. Donovan Mitchell passed him the ball behind his back, and Strus decided he was going to let it fly from behind the arc. Since this would probably be his last shot attempt, this single shot would determine whether or not this parlay would hit. Tucker tried to swat it, but it was too late. The parlay successfully cashed, and A. Williams so far went from $25 to nearly $30,000. I know I keep saying this, and at this point it may be hard to believe, but I promise you it still gets even crazier from here. Only a day after hitting this once-in-a-lifetime parlay, just like last time, he took it up a notch once again and placed his biggest bet yet. He was being safe though. Instead of a ridiculous 5-leg parlay with plus 2,500 odds, he went with a 4-leg parlay with plus 1,500 odds this time. How much would he wager on a parlay like this? $2,000. You know, nothing too major. If this parlay somehow hit, it would pay out $31,000. This time, he needed Anthony Simons to score over 21.5 points, Miles Bridges to also score over 20.5, DeAndre Hunter to score over 12.5, and finally, Damian Lillard to hit over 3.5 threes. The Trailblazers game started, and I'm not gonna lie, Simons had it on lock the whole game. He scored 30 points that game, which put him way over the 21 he needed. Next up, the Timberwolves game got rolling, and Bridges was also playing pretty good. He made it to the fourth quarter, and with 6 minutes left in the game, he had 20 points. All he needed to do was get one single point over the rest of the game, and things would be all good. Bridges ran into the paint, and just like that, A. Williams was 2 for 2. The Cavs game got started, and DeAndre Hunter was doing his thing. By the fourth quarter, he had 12 points, so he just needed one more shot to fall, and everything would be good. Hunter finally went up with the ball, and A. Williams once again found himself in a situation where he only had one leg left in the parlay. His destiny was in the hands of Damian Lillard. Over the season, he averaged 3 3-pointers a game, which was one short of what he needed to get that night. But that didn't matter, because A. Williams felt like it was bound to happen. You may not believe me when I say this, but there is definitely a sports betting genie somewhere out there. Because, seriously, just watch this. 2 minutes into the game, this happened. A few minutes after that, he made another and was 2 for 2. Right after that, this happened. Then no joke, 30 seconds of game time later, he got this one. 4 for 4 from the 3-point line in the first quarter with 16 points overall. This is the opposite of what most sports bettors see. Usually, you get the over on someone and they start playing like Michael Scott in the warehouse. That being said, 4 out of 4 legs were right and paid out a grand total of $30,978. A. Williams had profited over $60,000 in the past 5 days with an initial $25 balance. And guess what? I know I keep saying this, but trust me, I haven't lied yet. It gets even crazier from here. The following day, he felt like he should push his luck even further, this time throwing $2,500 into one parlay and $1,200 into another only 40 minutes later. Both parlays had just under plus 1,200 odds, and if both of them somehow hit, they would pay out $47,000 collectively, taking his total gain over the past few days to $100,000. Even though he had been pretty lucky so far, these could be the ones that started the downward spiral. For his first parlay, he needed Kobe White to score over 20.5 points, Kelly Oubre Jr. to score over 18.5, Aaron Nesmith to score over 12.5, and finally Alperen Sengun to score over 20.5. For his other parlay, he needed Paolo Banchero to get at least 8 rebounds, Luke Cornett to get over 9.5 points, Nick Claxton to get at least 8 rebounds as well, and lastly Onyeka Okongwu to get over 14.5 points. The Bulls versus the Magic was the first game of the night and was actually on both of his parlays. Paolo got 9 rebounds that game and cashed the over, and Kobe White actually dropped 44 points that game, which was his new career high. I'm telling you guys, this genie is not a force to be reckoned with. These players should be paying A. Williams for betting on them, cause what are the odds he dropped 44 points when his season average was 20? Next game up was the 76ers versus Celtics game, and this one was also on both of his parlays. Luke Cornett needed 9 points that game, but unfortunately, he was just not shooting the ball. The first quarter, he didn't shoot a single time. The second quarter was a little bit better, but not by a lot. Peyton Pritchard lobbed it up to him, and luckily he slammed it down. A few minutes later, he got sent to the free throw line, missed the first one, but hit the second. And that was it for the second quarter. 3 points in the first half of the game was not a great sign for the parlay, but hopefully things would turn around. Early on in the third quarter, Derek White lobbed it up to Cornett and he once again dunked it in. Then, 2 minutes later, White passed him the ball again and he went for another dunk. Cornett now had 7 points. He just needed one more shot and the parlay would be saved. But over the rest of the third quarter, no more points were scored from him. The fourth quarter rolled along, and just less than halfway in, thank goodness Derek White lobbed it up yet again for another Cornett dunk. Phew! He ended off the night with 9 points, which just barely cashed the over. During the same game, Kelly Oubre Jr. also cashed his over pretty easily with 27 points. A. Williams was 2 for 2 on 2 different parlays that night, and once again, if the other 2 legs hit on each parlay, he'd win $47K that night. The Pacers versus Hawks game started, and Aaron Nesmith and Onyeka Okongwu both played pretty well that night, easily getting their overs. Nesmith dropped 21, and Okongwu dropped 20. Yet and yet and yet again, A. Williams only needed one more leg to hit on either one of his 4-leg parlays, and he'd be paid out a whole lot of money that night. The Rockets game started, and Sengun was playing good, but not good enough for it to be a sure thing. He scored 6 points the first quarter and for the second quarter. With 10 points in the first half, he was starting to fall off track. Luckily, he scored 8 points early on in the third quarter, but after that, things got real slow. He got his 20th point early on in the fourth quarter, and 2 minutes later, Amen Thompson passed him the rock and Şengün sealed the deal. Good thing he did too, because this would be his last shot of the game. If he didn't get the ball here, the parlay likely wouldn't have hit, but since it did, A. Williams made another $30,000. No time to celebrate though, because he was in the middle of watching the Warriors game, which would also bring him another $15,000 if things went as planned. Claxton needed at least 8 rebounds that game, and luckily, he already got 4 in the first quarter. He slowed down a bit in the second quarter with only 2 rebounds, but still, he was on track. Third quarter, he got 2 more, which meant somehow A. Williams went 2 for 2 that night on these huge parlays, winning multiple tens of thousands of dollars. He took a break from betting, not because he was done, just because there weren't any more games left that night. But the next day, he wagered more than $33,000 on 3 different bets. Even though he was up quite a bit of money, this $33K would of course go down the drain if he had a bad night. And once you start losing it, it's common for people to dig themselves in even deeper holes trying to chase it all back. Regardless, A. Williams took all this and threw it out the window. He quickly wagered $16,000 on Presbyterian with a 12.5 point spread. This means the Presbyterian Blue Hose could lose the game, they just couldn't lose by more than 12 points. Unless A. Williams wanted to lose $16,000, of course. The game started and things went as expected. Presbyterian was losing, which was fine. But what wasn't fine was the fact that they were down by 14 by the end of the first half. They needed to cut that gap down in the second half or else things would get ugly. Presbyterian knew what they had to do, and they did it very well. They somehow took the lead over Radford and were winning by 2 with 8 minutes left in the game. This is insane considering Presbyterian was a very heavy underdog. But like I said, that genie was working overtime this week apparently. The game was coming to a close, and Presbyterian was down by 2. But with 30 seconds left in the game, Kobe Stewart swooped in and made a layup which tied things up. They were going into overtime, which was fine as long as Radford didn't somehow go on a 13-point streak. And they didn't. Presbyterian lost, but only by 5 points, which meant that A. Williams' wager paid out another $31,000. One thing I didn't tell you though was that A. Williams placed another bet 8 minutes after he placed this one. He bet that Belmont would outscore Illinois State in the first half of the game, and yeah, there wasn't much competition. So on top of his $31,000 payout on his first bet, he made an additional $6,000 in profit with this one. He decided to wager another $11,000 only an hour after placing his last bet. The Cavs were playing against the Hornets, and all he needed was for Evan Mobley to score in the first 3 minutes of the game. The odds of this happening were pretty split, but if he lost, that would be $11K gone real quick. The game started, and only 40 seconds later, this happened, and just like that, A. Williams won another $8,000. He posted to the subreddit and said $25 to around $114,000 since last Saturday, all in pictures. As we've discussed, he did indeed make $114K. He acknowledges that this is once in a lifetime luck and decided to take a break so he could come back another day with a clear mind. He also says that he used to be down sports betting and would just look at everyone posting wishing it could happen to him. Safe to say, it finally happened. He doesn't want to post his bets ahead of time because he feels like it will jinx him. And cherry on top, in another comment, he corrects the mistake he made in the title of the post and realized he made $124K instead of $114. I think the top comment of this post really sums up his journey the best. Seriously though, this is probably one of the craziest sports betting runs of all time, which is pretty clear based on how long it took me to get through his story. Also, not to be a stalker, but 9 days after this, he posted a picture of his brand new GMC Sierra that he paid for with cash straight out the bank. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment who had the craziest bet.